Misqua, Misquanaquan Indigenous Cause, Makwa and Dude, Obashing and Dunjaba. It's a pleasure to be here. You know, I'm excited. Who's feeling the burn? Who wants to be part of this revolution? I encourage everyone to get out and caucus on Super Tuesday, Tuesday, the 1st, at your local precincts for Bernie Sanders. Some of the reasons why I support Bernie is because he's a candidate that I believe in the future, believe that he is working for the middle Americans, somebody that will stand up for us in our fight to rid this corporate corruption. He has the political motivation. If you see somebody, an elder statesman like him, go from state to state every day, that brings me encouragement, thinking I can do this. He's a great example for our younger generation. So I support him, and I encourage all of you to get out there and support Bernie Sanders. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. What a great crowd on such a short notice, but it doesn't surprise me because all over America, people have been turning out for Bernie Sanders because he's been consistently, his political career, standing up for the working men and women in this country. We've been consistent up here in the Iron Range of Minnesota, too, for 130 years, 5 generations. We've been mining the ore that makes the steel planet. So why are 2,000 of my steelworker friends and 2,000 other employees that support the steel industry laid off in this area right now? And I'll tell you why. Because of Wall Street. Because they don't care. They don't care about the American. If you check his record of over 30 years, has stood fast and firm against all of those unfair trade laws that are hurting the American worker. And he's got a plan, whether it's building our infrastructure, bringing jobs back to America. He's got a plan for all of us and middle-class people here in this country. And one other thing I want to talk about that Bernie's been talking about all across America is the way these young people are being treated, trying to get an education, going to college, and ending up for Main Street instead of Wall Street, that always sticks up for our pension.
Going to do what has to be done for the working families and the middle class. We are today the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, but not 1%. Yesterday I was in Flint, Michigan, brothers and sisters, and I hear about the high rates of poverty. What I'm going to have to address is to say that in America, the grotesque levels of income and wealth inequality are unacceptable. It is unacceptable that the top 1/10 of 1%, 1/10 of 1%, now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. That the 20 wealthiest people in this country now own more wealth than the bottom half of America because they touch on these very issues. When we talk about why it is that the middle class of this country is disappearing and why we see so much income and wealth inequality, one of the reasons is a series of disastrous trade policies. And the steelworkers and I were just talking about this a moment ago. And you don't need to have a PhD in economics to understand what these trade agreements were about. I understood it in the early 1990s. These trade agreements were written by corporate America with a very simple purpose. What corporate America said is, why do I want to pay workers in Minnesota 20, 25, 30 bucks an hour when I can shut down plants and manufacturing facilities, mines here in this country? I can go abroad, pay people nickels an hour, and bring products back into this country. That's it. 2 sentences. That's what trade policy is about. Now, you're looking at a former congressman and a United States senator who said, not only will I not vote for NAFTA, I'm going to help lead the opposition to NAFTA. And I voted against CAFTA, and I voted against permanent normal trade relations with China, and today I'm helping in the Senate to lead the opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And I do understand what's going on up here in the Iron Range about the loss of many, many, many hundreds of good-paying jobs because cheap Chinese steel is being dumped into the United States of America. And together, we are going to end that. I want to tell you 2 stories with regard to trade. And I make this point because my views on trade from day one have been very, very different than Secretary Clinton's. When she was First Lady, she was a strong supporter of NAFTA. She supported permanent normal trade relations with China. Both of those trade policies have been an unmitigated disaster. 2 stories that I want to tell you about trade. Early 1990s, I went on a congressional delegation to Mexico, to an area called the Maquiladora area. It's a special zone where the Mexican government encourages foreign companies, American and European as well, to come there. And you go to the zone, and you see these beautiful new factories, state-of-the-art factories. And then you go to talk to the workers who worked in those factories. And I went and talked to those workers, and I visited them. Now, I wish I could tell you that I visited them in their homes. I can't tell you that, because I visited them in their cardboard shacks. You know the cardboard that you get when you buy a new refrigerator or a washing machine? Those were their homes. They were drinking dirty water. At that point in the early 1990s, they were making 25 cents. Terrible impact, by the way, not only on American workers where we lost jobs, but on Mexican workers as well. Story number 2. A number of years ago, I went to China. And you see in China just an explosion at that point in time of all kinds of new factories, American companies, European companies. Explosion of new factories. You see these huge cranes all over the place, building factories. We were taken to a Walmart store in China. And ironically, Walmart store in China looks very much like an American Walmart, different products, but it looks a lot alike. So I asked the guy, and you remember the theory about permanent normal trade relations with China is we're going to open up this new market in China. Billions of people are going to be buying products from Minnesota and from Vermont. So I asked this guy who works for Walmart, I said, look, I'm walking around here and I see all these American products being sold in Walmart in China. And I said, just out of curiosity, what percentage of these products are actually made in the United States of America? And he said, he was very sheepish about it, a little bit shy. He said, well, maybe 1%. Well, of course they're not going to be made in America when you get labor there at a fraction of the cost that you have in the United States of America. And we now have a huge trade deficit with China right now. Add up NAFTA, add up permanent normal trade relations with China, we have lost millions and millions of decent paying jobs. And not only have we lost millions of jobs, what we are also seeing is a race to the bottom. A couple of years ago, there was a story in the papers about General Electric expanding in Louisville, Kentucky. And somebody asked the guy, they created a couple of hundred jobs, and somebody said to the manager there, how come GE is now expanding in America? And what the guy said in so many words is that, well, you know, actually, America and our labor costs are now becoming competitive with China. You follow what I'm saying? In other words, in terms of transportation, in terms of worker productivity, they looked at it, that the new manufacturing jobs in America are now paying wages so low that they're becoming competitive with China in terms of a race to the bottom. We all want to see poor people around the world do better. But we can help poor people around the world do better without destroying the middle class and working class of this country. So on trade policy, Secretary Clinton supported NAFTA, supported PMTR with China. Reluctantly, after all of the unions, including the steelworkers, pushed her, she came in opposition to the TPP. But the Chamber of Commerce, the National Chamber of Commerce, kind of indicated they're not so sure that she will stay with that position if she's elected president. Trust me, I will stay in opposition. Not a very radical idea, but we need trade agreements which work for working families, not just the CEOs of large multinational companies. Now, when I talk about a rigged economy, part of what that is trade. The rigged economy is that corporations develop policies which are good for them. You know, the truth is that if a corporation could shut down in America today and make an extra nickel by going to China, that's what they'll do. Many of these companies that are shut down here, it's not because they weren't profitable. It's just that they can make even more money by going to China. That's part of a rigged economy. And when you talk about a rigged economy, you also have to talk about a corrupt campaign finance system. Together. Nothing is separated from each other. Everything ties into everything else. So what you got right now, as a result of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, you now have billionaires, wealthiest people in this country, Wall Street, pouring huge amounts of money into the political process. In essence, buying elections. Now, when you have a handful of billionaire families, and when you have Wall Street pouring huge amounts of money into the political process, this is a scary, scary situation. Now, we have veterans out in the audience, men and women who put their lives on the line to fight for American democracy. When a billionaire can buy an election, that's not democracy, that is oligarchy. Midterm election, 63% of the American people didn't vote. I think the people are saying, why should I vote? Hey, I got one vote. Billionaires are buying elections. Nobody in Washington is listening to me. why do I want to be part of this charade? Why do I want to vote? So what we have got to do, very important issue, so it ties into everything else, we have got to overturn this disastrous Citizens United civil rights. Easy to talk the talk, it's a little bit harder to walk the walk. I made a decision early on that I would not be begging Wall Street or corporate America or the billionaire class for funds. We decided we do not want a super PAC. Thank you. Somebody said the other day, they stood up in the audience, they said, Bernie, we are your super PAC. And you are a super PAC, and I thank you for that. And I'd rather have you on my side a million times over than all the money in the world from Wall Street. My opponent has a different position. She has a super PAC, and in the last reporting period, her super PAC, her major super PAC, received $25 million, $15 million of which came from Wall Street. She also received, many millions of dollars in speaker fees. Now, she's a very good speaker, I admit that. But to get $225,000 for a speech to Goldman Sachs, you got to be really good. I don't know that she's that good. And when the New York Times just yesterday in an editorial said, you know what, it might be a good idea to release the transcript of what you said to Wall Street, maybe what you said behind closed doors is a little bit different what you're saying. Do it if other people do it. I am prepared to release all of the transcripts I got for secret meetings in Wall Street. Here they are! Now, there's another difference. Now, the most important foreign policy issue that the United States has had to deal with in the last 20 years has been the Middle East and has been the war in Iraq. Now, when I was in the House in 2002, I listened very, very closely to what President Bush and Vice President Cheney and Don Rumsfeld and all these guys were saying about how we had to go to war in Iraq. I didn't believe them. And if you go to my website and hear what I said in 2002, essentially what I said is, of course Saddam Hussein is a brutal dictator, murderer, bad guy, very bad guy. But what happens the day after you overthrow Saddam Hussein? What kind of political vacuum is developed? What kind of chaos will occur? The war in Iraq was the worst foreign policy blunder that this country has made in many, many decades. I led the opposition to that war. Secretary Clinton voted for that war. We have a difference on those issues. We are where we are today, and it is imperative that we go beyond establishment politics because we are fighting a fight for the survival of the middle class and the working class of this country. When workers lose decent-paying jobs, especially if they have a union behind them, they end up working in Walmarts or McDonald's for half the wages, less than half the wages, with minimal benefits. That is not the future of this country that I want to see for our children and our grandchildren. We have got to rebuild our manufacturing sector, create decent paying jobs here. Now, one of the reasons that people are working such long hours, and I'm sure many of you know this, that in America, we got millions of people working 50, 60, 70 hours a week. And the reason for that is that wages in this country are too damn low. Now, you can do the arithmetic as well as I can. I know here in Minnesota you've raised the minimum wage, and that's a good thing. But we have got to go beyond what Minnesota has done, and we have to understand that you can't make it on 10, 12 bucks an hour. You can do the arithmetic as well as I can. Just multiply $10 by 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year. In my view, and I'm going to fight and work with unions to make this happen, we've got to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour over the next few years. Now, that's not a radical idea. All that idea is that if you work 40 or 50 hours a week, you should not be living in poverty. And the other thing we have to do, and I know every man in this room will stand with the women, and that is to make certain that we have pay equity for women workers in this country. There is no rational economic reason why a woman should be making 79 cents on the dollar doing the same work as a man. That's sexism. We're going to end that. Now, when we talk about the economy, we also have to talk about jobs and unemployment, and we don't do that enough. Every month, the federal government comes out with a statistic called official unemployment. Official. Government also comes out with another statistic which essentially talks about real unemployment as opposed to official. Officially, nationally, we're 5% unemployment. Anybody here believe that real unemployment is 5%? No. It's not. Real unemployment, including those who have given up looking for work and those who are working part-time, is 9.9%, almost 10%. And here's something that is even worse, which media never talks about, and not talked about much in Congress, and that is youth unemployment. And I just talked to some people from the Native American tribes, and they talk about very, very high levels of unemployment. Here's what we got for youth unemployment. If kids between 17 and 20 who graduated high school, by the way, if they're white, real unemployment, 33%. Latino unemployment, 36%. African American unemployment, 51%. Native American youth unemployment, probably higher than that. Okay? Now, if anybody thinks in this room that there's not a correlation between high youth unemployment and the fact that we have more people in jail than any other country on earth, you would be mistaken. Now think about this. In America, this is the richest country in the history of the world. We have 2.2 million people in jail, largely African American, Latino, and Native Americans. We spend $80 billion a year locking up fellow Americans. That's right. So you want a radical idea? Here's a radical idea. That we're going to invest in jobs and education for those kids on the reservations, those kids in the ghettos. We're going to invest in jobs and education, not jails and incarceration. Now, I am told this morning that half of the kids, Native American kids around here, do not graduate high school in the normal 4 years. Well, we're going to change that. We're going to give kids the education that they need, and we're going to get kids the jobs that they need, because when kids have education and jobs, there's a strong likelihood that they're not going to turn to opiates and heroin, and they're not going to get themselves in trouble. So let's invest in our kids. When we talk about education, let me suggest to you something that some of you may think is radical, but it really is not radical. And that is that today, a college degree, in many respects, is the equivalent of what a high school degree was 50 or 60 years ago. 50 or 60 years ago, you can go to high school, get out of high school, you probably can get a pretty good job. Today, it is harder and harder to do that. You can do that, but it is harder and harder. I believe that in the year 2016, when we talk about public education, it's not good enough just to talk about first grade through 12th grade. It is important to say that public education means that every public college and university in this country should be tuition free. Now, why is that important? It's important not only that it will enable young people to go out and get good jobs. And I came from a family, never had any money. My dad dropped out of high school. My mother graduated high school. But what it means to the people here, to the kids here in Hibbing and all over this country, is that if they know, if their parents know, if their teachers know, that those kids do their schoolwork seriously, they will, in fact, be able to get a post-high school education regardless of the income of their families. That's a radical idea. Now, not every kid wants to go to college or is academically inclined. We need plumbers and carpenters and pipe fitters. We need people to help us install solar panels. All right? Those are good-paying jobs, and our young people need that training as well. Let me touch on another issue that impacts every single one of us. And that is that as a member of the Senate Energy Committee and the Senate Environmental Committee, I have talked to scientists all over this world. And what they say almost unanimously is that climate change is real, it is caused by human activity, it is already doing devastating problems, causing devastating problems in our country and all over the world. And what they tell us is if we do not get our act together, if we do not transform our energy system away from fossil fuel into energy efficiency and sustainable energy, the planet that we're going to be leaving our children and our grandchildren is a planet that will not be healthy or particularly habitable. We have a moral responsibility to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel. And by the way, when you make that transformation, we can create millions of decent paying jobs, building the solar panels we need, building them here in America, not in China. Building the wind turbines we need here in the United States. And when we talk about jobs, it's not just the millions of jobs we can create in sustainable energy. Everybody in this room knows that we have an infrastructure that is collapsing in many parts of this country. Bridges which are collapsing. That we have, in my own state of Vermont, many, many bridges are in disrepair, roads that need an enormous amount of work, water systems, wastewater plants, airports, rail. We used to have the best rail system in the world, no longer the case. Airports, levees, dams, you name it. I believe we should make a $1 trillion investment in rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. And when we do that, we're going to create 13 million decent-paying jobs, making this country more productive. We, as a nation, have got to think big. We have to think small. Part of what is going on in this country is there is, from the ruling class of America, a desire for you all, for all of us to think in austerity terms. And that is to say, well, we can't afford that. We can't afford this. We have to lower our expectations. In fact, a couple of years ago, rather amazingly, a guy who was the head of Goldman Sachs, he's a billionaire. This guy is a billionaire who has a retirement package the likes of which nobody in this room could even dream of, okay? Billionaire. Comes to Washington, and he says, you know, in America now we're going to have to cut Social Security, and we're going to have to cut Medicare, and we're going to have to cut Medicaid. This from a multi-billionaire. Which leads me to another story that I want to tell you. I'm in the storytelling mood this morning, so sorry about it, but that story of him coming to Congress saying that what we need in this country are more tax breaks for the rich and cuts to Social Security, that got me a little bit upset. But I want to tell you another story. What our campaign is about is telling the American people truth. And sometimes they're unpleasant truths. And here is the unpleasant truth. We have a corrupt campaign finance system dominated by big money. We have a rigged economy by which the middle class is shrinking, people on top are doing phenomenally well, and we have a broken criminal justice system. Let me tell you, today a kid in Minnesota, kid in Vermont gets picked up for possession of marijuana. That kid will have a police record which will stay with him or her for the rest of their lives. And you know, that's not a joke, because you go out, get a job, and your employer says, well, tell me about yourself. You have been arrested. Well, yeah, 3 years ago I was arrested for possession of marijuana. Well, okay, we got somebody else who might be interested in the job. Serious business. So you got kids, and you got over a 30-year period, millions of people, by the way, who have criminal records as a result of possession of marijuana, which is a whole other story. But that's one reality. And then you got another reality. If you are an executive on Wall Street, and if your greed and recklessness and illegal behavior resulted in the destruction of a large part of our economy, millions of people losing their jobs, their homes, and their life savings, so many lives, older people, just really ravaged. If you are that executive, do you know if you get a police record or not? And the answer is you do not get a police record. You get a salary and compensation increase. And that is called a broken criminal justice system. What all of us grew up believing is if you're rich and if you're poor, if you break the law, under our system of government, you are treated equally. Equal justice under the law. That's a profound statement. Profound statement. All of us treated equally under the law. That is not the case today. If you are wealthy and powerful and you're on Wall Street and you destroy the American economy, you're not going to get a police record. If you're a poor kid picked up with marijuana, you will. Together, we are going to restore justice to a broken criminal justice system. Now, I am criticized every single day. What people say to me is, Bernie, you know, you think too big. Your ideas are too grandiose. You're asking for too much for the working families of America. How dare you? And let me respond in two ways. Number one, I find it interesting that over the last 30 years, there has been a massive redistribution of wealth in this country. You all know that? Problem is, it's gone in the wrong direction. Middle class, working class have lost wealth. Top 0.1% have seen a doubling of their wealth. Well, it's kind of what this camp... You know, and I hear the establishment, they're very worried about my proposals. How dare you think so big and it's so expensive? Where was the establishment worrying when the middle class was disappearing and trillions of dollars in wealth going from the middle class to the top 0.1%? I didn't see big editorials in the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post worrying about that massive shift of wealth. But now, because we are talking about creating an economy that works for all, oh my goodness, they are so worried. So let me tell you this. When I talk about making public colleges and universities tuition-free, we're going to pay for that by a tax on Wall Street speculation. Our government bailed out Wall Street. Now it is Wall Street's time to help the middle class of this country. When I talk about creating 13 million good-paying jobs by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, I will tell you how we pay for that. We pay for that by doing away with these outrageous corporate tax loopholes that allow corporations, some of which make billions of dollars a year in profit, to stash their money in the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, and in other tax havens and end up not paying a nickel in federal income tax. So we're going to do away with that loophole and invest that money, $100 billion a year, into rebuilding our infrastructure. Now, I want to touch on another issue where I have been criticized for. And that is, again, I'm thinking too big. You know, I'm asking too much. And I am saying, why is it that if the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Holland, all of Scandinavia, Italy, Canada, in fact, every major country on earth can guarantee health care to all of their people, why can't we do that in the United States of America? Now, in my view, the Affordable Care Act has done a lot of good things, and I'm on the committee that helped write the Affordable Care Act. What we have done is done away with this obscenity, private insurance company obscenity of pre-existing conditions. All right? We have done away with discrimination against women who are paying higher premiums because they are women. We have added 17 million Americans into the ranks of the insured. All of that is a good thing. But today, 29 million Americans still have no health insurance, and many of you, if I am not mistaken, have high deductibles and high copayments. Am I right? Yeah. All right. Who wants to tell me? Anyone want to tell me what your deductibles are? How much? $5,000 a year. 5,000? $1,000 a month to have the union insure. So despite the union benefits, it's $1,000 a month. $1,000 a month. And that's what your family is paying, $1,000 a month? And a $3,500 deductible. So here is the problem. Technically, you are insured. You're in the ranks of the insured. But in reality, $1,000 a month is a good part of your income, is it not? All right, what this woman just said is she's spending $1,000, correct me if I'm wrong, $1,000 a month out of pocket, which is over half of your income. All right, my friends, well, that's another issue about dental care is another issue. Okay? All right. But her story, you see, now, in the statistics, you're insured. End of discussion. Everything is great. But in reality, it's not so great. In reality, I mean, it's hard to believe. Again, this gets back. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. This woman is just telling us she's spending over half of her income on health care despite having union health care. Yes? All right. That is insane. You all get that? It's insane. And then what you got is you got millions of people who have these high deductibles. And if you have a high deductible and you don't have a lot of money, what happens? You don't go to the doctor. And I have talked to doctors all over this country. And you know what they tell me? People are walking into their offices much sicker than they should be. And the doctor says, why didn't you come to me 6 months ago when you first felt your symptom? And they say, well, I had a high deductible. Or I didn't have any health insurance at all. And then you know what happens? Some of those people die. In fact, thousands of people in this country every year die because they don't get to a doctor when they should, or they end up in the hospital much sicker than they should have been. Bottom line here is pretty simple to me. When you got 29 million people with no health insurance, when you have people like that woman who are very, very underinsured, when we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, we are in a situation which is so crazy, where 1 out of 5 people who go to the doctor and get a prescription, they are unable to afford to pay for that prescription. Stop. Think for a moment. How crazy is that? If you are sick and you go to the doctor and the doctor says, okay, this is your problem, ABC, here's your prescription. It'll help you. But I can't afford to fill the prescription. What happens if I can't afford to fill the prescription? You get sicker. Maybe you die. And in fact, there are oncologists writing to us in Congress who are saying that our cancer patients cannot afford. Cost a pill? $1,000 a pill. Meanwhile, that same drug is sold around the world for much, much lower prices. In the 1990s, I took Vermonters over the Canadian border, women who had breast cancer. They were able to buy the medicine they needed in Canada for 1/10 of the price they were paying in Vermont. Does any of this make sense? This is crazy stuff. And that is why I believe it is time to take on the pharmaceutical industry, the private insurance companies. And why I believe we have got to move toward a Medicare for all health care program. Health care, in my view, is a right, not a privilege. And we are now paying, everybody needs to know this, we pay almost 3 times per person what they do in the United Kingdom, 50% more than the French, far more than the Canadians. We can, if we move to a Medicare for All program, save the average middle-class person family thousands of dollars a year in health care costs. That's what we should be doing. Now, real change in America never takes place from the top on down. It always takes place from the bottom on up. That is the history of the trade union movement. Am I right? Nobody gave you collective bargaining. People fought and went to jail and were beaten and sometimes died for the right to organize a union and engage in collective bargaining. Same thing for the civil rights movement, same thing for the women's movement, same thing for the gay movement. No one gives you freedom. No one gives you dignity. You have to fight for dignity. And that is where we are today as a nation. There are some people out there, people like Trump and others, who want to divide us up. They think they can get votes by making bigoted and racist remarks about Latinos, or telling us that we're supposed to hate Muslims. Now, among other things, yes. All right, but my view is that we will stand or fall as a nation, depending on whether we stand together. Black and white and Native American and Latino. Men and women and gay and straight, we're all in this together. And when we stand together, and when we have the courage to take on greedy, selfish, powerful special interests, whether it is Wall Street, whether it's the fossil fuel industry, whether it is the pharmaceutical industry, people who are only concerned about their own short-term profits and could care less about the American people. If we come together and make what I call a political revolution, bring millions of people into the political process, my friends, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. That's what this campaign is about. Tuesday, here in Minnesota, we've got a very, very important election. I urge you to come out to the caucuses. I urge you to participate, to bring your friends and your neighbors. If we can win here in Minnesota, we've got a real path to victory for the Democratic nomination. Thank you all very much.
Our job is not to divide. Our job is to bring people together. If we do not allow them to divide us up by race, by sexual orientation, by gender, by not allowing them to divide us up by whether or not we were born in America or whether we're immigrants, when we stand together as white, black, and Hispanic, gay and straight and woman and man, when we stand together and demand that this country works for all of us rather than the few, we will transform America. And that is what this campaign is about. It's bringing people together.